So today I'm going to be talking to Antony Holloway. Hi, Anthony.
Hi,
how
Vic.
are you apart from exhausted?
I'm absolutely fine, thank you. No, I'm actually delighted that I've managed to work out how to use a computer. So there.
No, we've had fun and games already. Okay, so traditional first question: what do you do?
I think chiefly I'm a sculptor and a musician, but I'd say they're pretty much the same thing. And I'd say all in all, I'm just an artist, I think. Yeah,
that's great. That's a nice art. I haven't had a sculptor on the podcast, so that's lovely. I had somebody who done pottery, so the nearest wild pottery, which is interesting. So let's take you back to the beginning, because we met a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, for the first time? But it transpired that we actually knew of in a roundabout sort of way one another, or bands. Or but there are lots of paths.
Yes, exactly.
So tell me, you're in France at the moment, but you didn't start off in France.
No, I was a teenager, I guess, in Kent, and our paths, the paths you're talking about, your path and my path, would have crossed in the Medway towns. My sister, one of my sisters, who's about 3 years older than me, was at art school in the Medway towns, and I was 15-year-old, kind of lost, looking for direction, and went to stay with my sister and came across the pot rivets and Wild Billy Childish. He dropped the wild, but he was Wild Billy Childish.
Yes.
And Sexton Ming and Bruce Brand and the Milkshakes, which came later and everything. But when my sister was at art school, so that was in 79, 80, I think it must have been, I was on that scene, and was lucky, I think, because punk rock had kind of finished, and I was, in a very, how do you say, a lost teenager, I think.
Okay.
And it helped me enormously. Found a lot going on in the Medway towns, and then, of course, a few years later, I came back. I actually moved there, and the scene was still going, so got involved in it myself.
Okay, let's go back a little bit before you were lost, if that's possible. So you said you did you grow up in Kent?
No, I was born in North Wales. When we moved to Wolverhampton, and then we moved to Kent when I was just before I started secondary school. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's an interesting sort of trajectory, really, isn't it? So
southbound.
Yes. Yes. So the thing is, because obviously you're interested in art and you're interested in music. Were you always interested? Or was this part of your lostness?
No, I was mostly interested in art and music. I came from a family where we all played musical instruments. We all went for the Saturday morning lessons and everything. And
right.
I started playing, had cello lessons maybe when I was 7 years old. And
oh my goodness! Right, okay.
Playing in local orchestras and playing school orchestras and doing competitions and things, and doing all the associated board exams and stuff. And then when I was by the time I was about 15, I was a competent cellist, and I think I was probably destined for going to music school. But at that point, someone told me a friend at school said I should get an electric guitar, and I did, and started playing in a punk rock band at the age of 15. It's kind of just overnight, really.
Yes.
It was a funny thing. I think it's to do with social situation. I think my family background was kind of fairly deranged, and I had a bit of a most untypical childhood. And
Okay.
rather,
In what way, if you don't mind asking? You don't have to answer that.
Absent father, mother mostly absent as well, just kind of at home with one of my sisters, other sisters leaving and not coming back, and just fending for myself, and I think feral. I think we were quite feral, actually, feral children, but strangely enough, never really went completely off the rails. But obviously, the punk rock thing was very helpful for me, because it was mostly to do with maybe not fitting into a mold and being yourself, and you know, sort of. And you get drawn to, when you're in those situations, you get drawn to other people who have similar things. I mean, I've all my friends, my friends now, as my friends then. I mean, maybe just everyone's screwed up and everyone has problems, but it does seem that you sort of you find each other when you're at that age, and playing music and listening to songs about disaffected people makes you realise you're not the only disaffected person.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you said about finding the others, because that's a phrase that I've heard in other quarters, all right, which is a little bit like when you get people that are, just loosely say, counterculture or counter everything. There is a case of trying to find others, and of course, if you go back to that period of time that you're saying, like late 70s, early 80s, it wasn't so easy to find the other people like that, unless, of course, you were involved and in a place where those type of people would have congregated, like art colleges or punk rock venues. And I think that's a point, that once you then discover there are other people who've got lives that are slightly not normal. Yes, then you realise, oh my God, I don't feel so
not just me then.
no, exactly, that's right. So the punk rock thing.
Yeah, we were talking about the cello. Now the funny thing was, you see, I was still going for the cello lessons, and I carried that on, you know, until until I actually went to, even after I left home, even when I was at art school, the first year I was at art school, I carried on going for cello lessons. It was like this thing I'd always done, and I just carried on going. And the art school thing came about really because I'd been playing in bands from 15 years old, and most of the gigs when I was younger, they were in local pubs. And then as I got older, they were at art schools. Generally, we played in art schools and pubs. So going to art school seemed like the best idea. And I met people who'd been to music school, and it just seemed like torture. It just seemed like practice, being shut in a room and practicing. And I was a fair musician, but I used to practice maybe an hour a day, even when I was, you know, a teenager. But the idea of practicing all day, every day, just did not appeal to me in the slightest. Being at art school and fighting and arguing with people about why you should make art seemed more productive. I'm not so sure now, but maybe you have to spend a lot of time fighting and arguing before you get to a place where you can calm down and actually practice for 6 hours a day or something. Not that I do.
Well, obviously, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, because I don't practice anything like the amount that I used to. But I don't actually think I need to. I know that sounds a bit, it sounds a bit, you know, arrogant. I don't mean it that way. I mean, it's like, well, what are you doing that stuff for? because it's easy, isn't it, to say, well, you could look at things like the technical aspect, and you could do this with art. You could look at the technique, and it's easy to evaluate that sort of stuff and be able to measure it and everything. But artistic ability or creativity is one of those things that you can't put on a balance sheet. And so it's easy in a college or to go, well, you need to practice more, or you need to do more of that. But it doesn't really give you that magic ingredient, I don't think. Well, in fact, I'm sure it doesn't give you that magic ingredient, does it, that sets you apart from other people. So, as you say, when you end up, this idea, I felt exactly the same about music college, because I never went to art school, never went to music college. Because to me, it was like, well, if you're going to do this thing, you've got to carve out that little bit of the world that's now you, and find yourself. And that's how I sort of looked at it. And I think that's the sort of thing that you're sort of saying, because you had enough years behind you playing cello to realise that there is a world of people who are either, I was going to say talented, I don't mean it this way, because to some extent it's almost like there's something wrong with them, that they're quite happy to sit down for 10 hours a day and practice. But for most ordinary people, they don't want to do that because it just seems like weird.
I think I have a need to express myself, whether I do it through talking to people or playing music or making something or doing a drawing. Is kind of neither here nor there. It's something which is basic instinct which is in me, and I need to get it out.
Yes.
The music, I suppose, is like a voice. It's like, but maybe you can't say things in words. You've got things in your head that you want to get out sometimes, and when you play a piece of music, you're speaking. There's some sound coming out, and it's as if you're saying something that you're desperate to say. It's an abstract thing,
yes,
but it's a feeling which you're expressing or manifesting by a sound, and you want other people to hear it. You want to communicate, and I think it's the other people hearing it is the thing. Because for me, music, God, it's so complicated, but
yes.
Playing music as a form of communication with other people. And I was talking about finding other people, but I make a sculpture to touch other people, to make a connection with other people. It's what you're looking for is a universal language, so that you can convey something which you feel, and then other people are going to pick up on it and think, Christ, thank God for that. I'm not alone. I know that feeling. I know what their vibe is, and I'm picking up on their vibe. Really, is one way of looking at it. But I always had this thing with music, that when you're playing other people's music, it's the composer who's the artist, and the musician is just a tool. Do you know what I mean? And I don't believe that, but I used to feel that. I used to think that, because if you just learn an instrument and then you just play what someone else tells you to play, you're just a tool. However, when a lot of music, you can read it if it's written, or if you learn it from something that you're just copying with your ear. You're still replaying it, and it's almost like someone's giving you some words, and then it's up to you to deliver them. Now, an actor is certainly an artist. You can read your script in so many different ways. If you give 10 different people a verse from Shakespeare, everyone's going to read it differently. I play a lot of Bach on the cello, and you can play. If there's an infinite number of ways of playing.
Yes, but the thing is, I don't think that's often taught like that early on.
No, and I think
that's the problem.
My fear as a teenager was that you go to a school, you learn to play an instrument, you're like a robot, and what you're going to be doing is just delivering other people's notes.
Exactly. That's the point.
And you're not, when you're a musician, you're actually just,
yes,
the music's flowing through you. I mean, the whole thing's like theatre. The whole thing's like a whole crowd of. It's not one person.
Totally,
it's not
totally
one person. You're all part of a big thing. And even if you make a painting, you're kind of part of a bigger scene. You may be the person holding a paintbrush, but there's other people who've been feeding things into your head. Everyone's going to be looking at it. You know,
yes. You're just part of the process,
everything is part of a big production.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
And I think, you know, it's just sort of an egos, and you know, that's what the other thing I'm bringing up there, I suppose, is ego. Is you have to realise it's nothing to do with you. It's nothing to do with ego. It is to do with that feeling of just being part of it. I suppose being part of the music, being part of the art, being part of the communication process, and communicating with people. When you perform on a stage, you may be the one performing, but you're communicating with the people there. It's a two-way thing. It's not just you that's delivering the music. The people are feeding back. I mean, you know, when you play live, if people are dancing or laughing or staring, it has a huge effect on how you play. I mean, well, for me it does. I mean, it's like a stand-up comedian. You know, you
exactly.
You thrive on it. It kickstarts something in you. And playing with other people, maybe that's a similar thing. But when you play with people and they're, you know, you're sharing a vibe with the people you're playing with.
Yeah,
I mean, that is just, you know, I play with people who have no spark, who I don't get on with, and it's just it's miserable. But when you're playing with people and it works, you sort of egg each other on. You know, someone you can just feel or hear someone doing something. It encourages you just to sort of give that bit more or try that bit harder. And you can feel this thing just building up between you, and then you go into this sort of place which is so different, and that is not being a tool and playing someone else's notes. You know, that is
absolutely, yeah. So let's talk about the sculpture work that you did, because when you were at Medway, you were saying about one of
at Medway, I did a foundation course, which means you do a bit of everything. You spend a whole year, and I think everyone should do a foundation course because it's just to do a week of all disciplines and something different every week. And you know, you could do one in music as well. It was an excellent course, excellent experience. But then I went to Wimbledon and I studied sculpture. I spent 3 years studying sculpture. I spent most of the time playing music and you know, sitting in the pub like all good art students. But I did quite a bit of work. I took it quite seriously and sort of learned a lot and listened a lot, talked a lot. And a couple of maybe 18 months or 2 years after I left, I had my first daughter. My first daughter was born, and I was obliged to earn some money and have, you know, be a bit more serious. And terrified of the idea of having a job or going to work, I managed to start getting work as a sculptor, working on public commissions. I just found all of the adverts I could find for public commissions and just applied. Luckily, got one. And once you get one, you use that to get your next one and your next one and your next one. And that was the point when I stopped playing music, really, for quite a long time. I worked professionally as a sculptor, had 4 children, and supported the family and kept making sculptures for about 15 years.
That's spectacular, because that is bloody difficult to do.
Well, it wasn't, though. Honestly, if you need to, you do. I could have done it playing music, to be honest.
I did. I had 4 daughters, and you know, and they were brought up on my income as a musician. So I get that, but it is difficult, you know, because you've got no. Well, it's not normal, is it? But
it's not. My wife worked as well. I mean,
yes.
I'm not saying I'm the superhero, but I certainly, by the end of it, I certainly had a decent income.
So you had was it your first commission? Was the one that
the first commission was in Swindon. Actually, the sculpture I made in the Medway. I made a few sculptures in the Medway towns. I made something at You know, the bottom of Gillingham Hill in Chatham, there's, what do they call that area there? It's called, Luton.
Luton
Arches down in Luton. I built some sculptures down there on a bit of reclaimed land. And that must have been the same year. That must have been 1999. So that's right. And then I built some arches, big arches outside the art school in Medway.
Yeah, because
Victoria Gardens, isn't it called, up the top there?
Yeah.
Which is just up the road from where I first saw the pot rivets. If you walked up,
so this is interesting.
If you walked up from the train station towards the up the hill, before the bandstand on the right hand side, there used to be a shed there. I think it was gone by the time I moved there in 82. I think I must have come to live there. But it was some kind of club. I don't know if it was a workingman's club or just a shed. God knows what it was. But that is where I saw the pot rivets for the very first time.
Yeah.
Funny.
So it's interesting this because when we were talking, I was saying that obviously I interviewed Billy Childish, and then it sort of transpired that you'd played in a load of bands. So you'll have to reel off a few names because as people that start to listen to this, it'd be like, oh my God, it's them.
Well, no, the main thing it was Tim Webster, who's unfortunately died last year. Tim was an amazing bloke. He was dyslexic, and as a result became a delinquent, and was sort of had all kinds of problems growing up, but in the end, he just started playing guitar and making guitars and screen printing posters for his own gigs. And I was lucky because when I was on Foundation in Medway, he was busking in the streets and I met him, and I'd already started playing sort of quite a bit of rock and roll and psychobilly music. So we instantly just started busking together, doing tea chest and doing a bit of skiffle and a bit of rock and roll. And then Martin Waller, who's the saxophonist with the Gruff Men.
All right, yeah.
I think the Gruff Men predate. I don't know if they predate the Prop Rivets or if it's at the same time. I can't. It's all a long way in the past.
It's all a bit of a hazy.
So we got together. We had a band called the Outer Limits, and then we later changed the name to the Sputniks. But that would have been around the same time. There were the Prisoners, and obviously Mickey. They were called Mickey and the Milkshakes because Mickey was still singing with them. So it was Mickey and the Milkshakes, the Prisoners, and there was a few others. There was the Dagger Men. I think there's the Dentists at some point.
The Dentists, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little story.
Johnny Dawn, who ended up playing the bass with Billy, was in the Dentists. But
yeah, I'll tell you a little story about the Dentists. There was a guy that I was teaching at King's School, because I was always teaching guitar. Chris Flack, and Chris was one of these lads that didn't do any practice. He had a nice classical guitar, but he was a really nice chap. He'd turn up for his lesson, say, "What have you done this week, Chris?" Not much. So very, very honest. And then one day he sort of rang me, just out of the blue, and said, "Have you got a second-hand electric guitar I can buy?" I went, "Yeah, I have actually." So I got, like 40 quid job. And then it sort of picked up a little bit. And then he rang me again one Sunday afternoon. It was a nice day. I was out in the garden. Get the phone rings, go in, pick it up. It's Chris on the phone. And he said, "I've decided to become really good." And remember, because this is really strange, really good. I went, "Okay." He said, "I've saved up my money and I'm going to go and buy a Gibson Les Paul." So I went, "Right." So this is what he did. And suddenly he became amazing. Just literally like it was like it was fermenting all this time. So they started a band in the school, and they were just doing Guns N' Roses covers. But this is like early on, when Guns N' Roses were quite new. And they nailed it. It's really good. So anyway, what happens is that Chris joins the dentists.
Right.
And then they go off touring. I think they did a tour in Europe, and I think they went to the Far East or something. Anyway. And then he just gave it all up, which is just so bizarre. So he got from like nothing. I think he became a policeman or something.
Did he ever go back? Did he ever go back to it though?
I lost contact with him. But it was this sort of thing of, you know, it just showed you that if somebody there was then suddenly bitten by the bug of playing, and it was sort of strange because I couldn't, you know, he was coming out of this sort of a particular type of rock music to join this particular band, and it was like, okay, I didn't quite get my head around how that sort of worked, and yeah, so that was quite interesting. Anyway, just another sort of bizarre sort of story, but yeah, so yeah, the dentist. I mean, there was obviously a lot of other bands of that period. Depends what sort of little sub.
Well,
because I think there's
very cliquey, very cliquey.
Very.
It was all the. It was that. Yeah, our particular clique. It was everyone was doing a pastiche of some sort of 50s or 60s music, and everyone had their own little niche. Which is a shame because it blinkers you. It shuts. I missed out years. I must have missed out sort of 5 years of music between 1980 and 1986. I missed out on all other music, you know, because I was just playing this pastiche of late 50s and early 60s rock and roll, and a very niche, very small sort of particular range of rock and roll as well, sort of instrumental.
Yeah.
Film
so you were telling me of a little excursion into Belgium.
Yeah, well, we did. There was a guy called Jonathan Barker, Johnny, who was around the Medway towns at the time, and he went off to work in Brussels, and I think he missed everyone and missed the music scene, so he sort of got it together to find gigs and invite people over. I know the Milkshakes used to go, and the Prisoners went, and then he asked us to go, and we went over there and played a few times, and there were big gigs. There was a lot of interest in real rock and roll bands from England. And then he put us on Belgian telly, which is excellent. It's a terrific experience. But
because
I told you a particular story of I went with Martin, the saxophonist, and Sexton. You should do a podcast with Sexton Ming about creativity, because he's insanely creative. Now, the story I told you about Sexton the other day, which I'm going to repeat now, is we went to Brussels for I think it was jazz poetry. I think it was a jazz festival, but it was poetry night. And me and Martin went with Sexton to watch him, to be there with him and watch him and everything. And it was an excellent sort of seedy basement, sort of dive of a pub, and sort of, lots of cats with roll neck jumpers sitting on high stools and having a fag, and it was a cool scene. And Sexton got on stage, and he had a very cheap Les Paul copy, Hondo 2 or something, and played Silver Machine, a very, very basic, simplified sort of bar chord version of it, and sang in a very monotonous, tuneless voice, I've Got a Silver Machine, and it was very well received. It's terrific. I didn't see how it fitted in with the evening, but no one else had a problem with it. It was great. And then he put his guitar down, lifted up his jumper, held the microphone to his stomach, or adjusted the stand so the microphone was almost touching his stomach, and announced that he was going to play Mission Impossible on his stomach, and then he just proceeded to pat his tummy with the palms of his hands and played Mission Impossible theme on his stomach. It was an absolute blast. It was that was creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sexton style.
That's brilliant. That's awesome. So I was going to say there was a lot of.
You see, if you want to be creative, you need to open yourself up to all sorts of
yes, you do
experiences. And I saw that was that's 42 years ago, maybe, that I saw Sexton doing that on his stomach, and it's still with me now.
Exactly.
It's as good as seeing the Mona Lisa. It's, it is. It's there.
It is absolutely.
It all goes in.
Yes, and I think that's the thing that, again, because a lot of these podcasts, I'm talking to obviously a lot of creative people from lots of different perspectives. But there is that thing about being able to see things in a particular, in a different way. And again, going back to this, what you were saying about the music college or studying music, where it all focuses on technique or the stuff that's easy to measure.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't.
Things.
Yes, yeah. And of course the thing about creativity is it's not really quantifiable.
No, not at all. No.
And it also doesn't make sense half the time when you come up with creative techniques. When you explain it to somebody, it's like they don't get it until you do the thing, and then suddenly this thing appears. And it's almost like, I don't know, you can see people thinking, I don't know how that happened. How did this crazy set of ideas end up with this? And but then, I think what was so interesting about the Medway towns, and although I wasn't in the Medway towns, we used to gig there a lot. I was up the road in Gravesend. And there were lots of stuff going on there, really good bands. But in the Medway towns, whether it's to do with the fact there was an art college and there was maybe different factions of people mixing, because it wasn't the safest place in the world.
I think it's edgy.
It was edgy. And I think that edginess gives rise to creativity in a strange sort of way. It's not, maybe because it's not so refined. I just throw that out there. Because it's one of those things, isn't it, that when you get arty places and then it becomes gentrified, it stops
the edge goes.
It does. The edge goes and the creativity goes. Because obviously the artists move out because they can't afford anything anymore in a particular place. You see that in lots of places, and as you get older, you see that happen, and you can see the cycle. The place that is the sort of arty place, and then you get the people move in because it's like that, but they're not necessarily arty people. They're the people that then they gentrify the area and it just loses it. I don't know, but it's just one of those things, isn't
it? The Medway towns was exceptional, but you had Rochester and Chatham adjacent to each other, and one has got Dickens and the cathedral and the castle and it's beautiful architecture and nice big Georgian house, Edwardian houses or whatever. And then you've got Chatham with the dockyard,
which has got all the characters
unemployment.
Yeah, but you've got all the characters out.
And that dead road that used to run between the two, Rochester High Street or Chatham High Street as it became, which where the Nag's Head was, that road was just like the march of death between the two towns. It was like no man's land.
But the interesting thing is those Dickensian characters that you looked at in the books, they were the characters in Chatham. And maybe they could have been like that at the time.
With you.
In the time of
Dickens.
They could have been those sort of characters there. Because actually, I remember Bill. I went to one of Billy's poetry readings, and he was talking about the people who never left Chatham. You know, they were the ones who were the people who on the ships. You know, the ancestors had been on the Navy ships, who were terrifying characters that terrified the French and terrified the Spanish, type of thing. And you think, well, there is something in that, because some people move and others don't. And, you know, you see that. I saw this in Dartford, actually. I went back and met up with a load of people from school. This was quite a few years ago. But when I got talking to them, they were the same people that I remember at the age of 14 or 15. But now they were 30 or 35. And they were the same people doing the same things and living in the same places. But then you got another bunch of people who'd moved away and they were doing other things. So I think there are certain elements, you know, certain types of people don't move. And maybe that's the type of thing that you see in Chatham and Rochester, where you get, as you say, the very sort of genteel aspect of Rochester. And then this other thing, which is like, as you say, you use the word outer limits for your band. But I mean, that's like Chatham. It's very much the outer limits, isn't it? I don't know how much it's changed, or whether, you know, whether it's the same.
I don't think it has, actually.
I don't think it has either. But, it's interesting. But yeah, you're right, and it gives that edginess to stuff. People are brave. I think that's the point. A lot of that music was very brave, because you were doing stuff that some people could just turn around and say, that's a load of old rubbish. People didn't care. They just played. And now I don't see that. I think I see a lot of people playing very safe. I don't know whether that's the case, but I tend to see it anyway. But it's certainly not the area that I came from anyway, musically.
I think it was just the fact that we're playing is fairly admirable. I just think so many people getting off their arse and actually playing is just fantastic.
And also, it came after the punk thing, which was you could just go and join the band.
Yeah. And that was the touch paper, isn't it? It's just maybe it took a while for it to trickle down to Kent, but you know, out of all of Kent, I mean, I was in Folkestone when I was 15 and started playing, and there were people trying to start bands we used to play, but too far away from London. I think actually when you're in Medway towns, you're close enough to be able to get onto a circuit and start playing. Playing at art colleges and at clubs and things like that. And
I think that's true. Absolutely, definitely. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time.
Yeah,
because obviously we started a little bit late. So you're not in Kent. You're in France. So tell me a little bit about how you ended up there, because it's an interesting story, I think.
Well, my dad had a house which he bought, and he died before he really moved into it properly. I inherited it. It wasn't worth a huge amount. I inherited it with 3 sisters, and no one was very interested in dealing with it. And I just ended up moving down here to finish the work on his house and to get rid of it, really, because it had to be dealt with. So we moved down here with my wife and 4 children, just as a one-year adventure, maybe. And after a year, we sold the house, and the adventure wasn't over. And we found a huge building project, renovation project that was a former Armagnac domain, so like a farm, really, but with loads of outbuildings, a beautiful big main house and lots of other houses and, you know, agricultural buildings and stuff, and about 12 acres of land. And we decided to stay in France. We thought it'd be I'd been doing the commissions for 15 years and in the sculpture commissions, and it was just getting very repetitive. And it's odd that, you know, making sculpture suddenly, eventually it just becomes like it's a job, you know.
Yeah.
It's very routine. My way of making sculptures was fairly routine. You work out, you know, you've got a way that your brain works and a way you sort of process the information and come up with solutions. And I was also spending a lot of time just driving around the country and having meetings with town planners or do presentations to community groups and get people on board and things like that. And it's not what I wanted to be doing. And all of a sudden, the idea of moving to France and just having space and being able to make sculptures without having to worry about public commissions seemed like a wonderful idea. And I thought it'd be great for 4 small children. But we ended up buying our own house and staying in France. And funnily enough, I was kind of lost interest in, I carried on making sculpture for a bit, but just being alive and doing up the house and dealing with the land just sort of took over. And it sort of, I think if your whole lifestyle becomes creative, the need to actually make things fades a bit, you know, sort of.
Yeah.
I'd broken the mold more in a lifestyle rather than by, you know, when I was making sculptures, I was working like 9-to-5 job. It's ridiculous. And yet being sort of, I was much more independent being out here. And then of course I got very involved in a lot of building work and renovating the house, which is quite a creative outlet, really. I mean, it's an old building and lots of natural materials and things. Funny, after about 5 years, I lost one of my eyes, my left eye, this one. It's plastic. And I immediately wanted to start making sculpture again. And I think that was just because of fear of the fact that I couldn't see properly anymore. No, I could see, but judging 3-dimensional objects, obviously, with one eye, it's fucked. So I had a quick burst of making some sculptures, and that lasted for a bit. And then shortly after that, someone asked me to play double bass. This was very good. This was I'm just completely by chance, very close to where I live down here. I met someone from the Escalators, who's a bass player from the Escalators, who played with a couple of musicians from the Meteors.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, we'd both played at the Tram Shed, and we'd both played at Clubfoot in Hammersmith and stuff. So we'd all both been part of the same kind of psychobilly, post-psychobilly scene there. So I got double bass, and we actually started playing a rockabilly band down here in southwest France. And for a few years, we got quite a few gigs, and we had quite a good laugh playing a bit of music then. In fact, that kind of stop, I crushed one of my fingers. And, we have a thing in France called Fête de la Musique, and every, I think it's 18th or 24th of June, but somewhere in the middle of June, there's a day which is Fête de la Musique, and everyone can have music all night long, and there's no rules about having to have a license for live music or anything like that. And everyone the idea is there's just music everywhere. And it was on the day of Fête de la Musique, I crushed my finger, and we were supposed to be playing somewhere. And obviously I couldn't play. I was hospitalized for a few days with this totally mangled finger. And my sole concern was whether I could play the cello. I don't know if I told you that. Maybe I did.
Yeah, you did.
And it was crazy because I hadn't played it for like 35 years. And my first thought wasn't, oh shit, the gig's cancelled tonight. It was fun. It was, can I play the cello? And as soon as my finger got better, I started playing the cello. And since then, that's about 5 years ago now, 5-6 years ago, I've still got double bass. I still do play the double bass. And I've started playing my semi-acoustic electric bass as well. I've been playing some blues and rock and roll with a local band, which is a blast. But now, all of a sudden, I've just found this new enthusiasm for playing the cello.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because obviously you're doing stuff with Chris Penfold as well, which is nice. Because that's where I met you. I went out to see Chris, and yeah. So I think this is interesting that, you know, because that sort of cyclic thing. Well, it's not cyclic. You know, the returning of something where you go back, and you know, you said that was a strange thought that, you know, can I still play the cello? The interesting thing for me, I don't play an awful lot of classical guitar, right? I go through phases of it, but I've still got long fingernails to play classical guitar. And that's one of those things, if I break my fingernail, it irritates me because I can't play classical guitar, even if I'm going through a period of time that I'm not doing any.
I do the opposite. I have to keep my fingernails trimmed right down.
Yes, but it's a similar sort of idea that I've gone back to playing classical guitar quite a bit now. You know, making sure I play every day so I can do a bit of sight reading and whatever, because it's not what I generally do. And I found that that's, again, it's something like it connects you to something that goes back a long way. It's almost like it's a part of your identity from the past. I don't know what that is.
Someone else's past.
Yeah, well, that's it. When you look at yourself, you think, I'm not that person anymore. Who was that person? But there is an element of that, I think, isn't there?
But the instruments are such funny things. I mean, to have total control of an instrument allows you to do so much. But to learn all that technique without becoming a robot requires, I think, a lifetime of doing other things.
Yes, I do. Which takes us back to that other thing. Yeah, absolutely.
All the sculptures I've made, all the rock and roll I've played, all the sort of fooling around and falling over on stage that I've done it helps me play the cello more or as much as hours and hours and hours of practicing the cello would.
Yeah,
you know, it's not just music. It's a spectacle. It's a performance. It's the biggest. You know, it's the bigger picture. It's the shape you make with the body. You know, body shapes and facial expressions. Jesus, when you play my cello face, you know, it's when you're concentrating. It's awful.
Yeah.
Your face. It's
yeah.
That would be my next thing is to have such control over the instrument that I could actually control my face. Would be something else.
Yeah, but that's true for every rock guitar player, right? Okay.
Yeah, faces.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, that's brilliant, mate. That was a fabulous chat, and we managed to get there in the end. We had a little bit of fun and games at the beginning, which obviously nobody saw, which was good. Yeah, so I'll put some things on the show notes, put the names of the bands and stuff like that we spoke about and everything, because I think that would be great fun for quite a lot of people that we know a lot of people from the Medway towns even now, so that'd be good. So yeah, so all the best, mate, and hopefully our paths will cross at some point musically.
I'll come and dig you out. I feel my mind is going. There's some Bach that I play, which is traditionally obviously played with harpsichord or even with harp. But I've heard certain things played with cello and guitar. Cello and guitar. Yeah, there are things that work with.
Sounds
with cello doing a solo and then the guitar's doing like sort of arpeggio, you know, background.
Yeah. That sounds good. That sounds good. Yeah. Good to do. All right then.
Make you do some work, learn it.
Yeah.
Nice talking to you. I'm sorry about the problems at the beginning.
No, that's no problem. Well, they won't come out on the recording anyway. Don't disappear. So I'll speak to you soon.